When a routine traffic stop turns into a career-defining moment, a police officer's worst assumptions clash with a truth he never saw coming. His target? The man who holds his future in his hands. As the sun dipped lower over the streets of Sacramento, streaks of gold and amber painted the sky. Eric Porter was heading home after a long day at the office, his sedan humming softly as he adjusted the air conditioning, eager to shake off the weight of the day. The radio played faintly in the background, a soothing contrast to the bustling city outside. As he approached a yellow light, he slowed, but just as it turned red, the blinding flash of blue and red lights erupted behind him, followed by the sharp wail of a police siren. Eric's gaze flicked to the rear-view mirror, his brows furrowing slightly. Without hesitation, he pulled over, rolling down his window as the police cruiser came to a stop behind him. The door opened, and out stepped Officer Bradley Larsson, mid-30s, buzz cut, badge gleaming on his chest. With a confident stride, he adjusted his belt and walked toward Eric's car, carrying himself like a man who is used to being in control. "License and registration," Larsson ordered curtly, his voice flat but edged with authority. Eric, without argument, reached for his glove compartment, retrieved his documents, and handed them over. His movements were calm and deliberate, but he could feel the officer's gaze lingering, studying him, searching for a reason to push further. "You know why I pulled you over?" Larsson asked, leaning slightly toward the window. Eric met his gaze, his tone polite but firm. "Not entirely sure." "You didn't come to a full stop at the light," Larsson stated, though there was a flicker of hesitation in his voice. Eric frowned slightly, but gave a small nod. "I see. I thought I slowed down in time, but I understand." For a moment, Larsson said nothing. Instead, his eyes narrowed, assessing Eric with a different kind of scrutiny. This was no longer just a routine stop, not for him. His posture shifted, subtle but telling, as if he had already decided there was more to this than a simple traffic violation. Glancing at the license in his hand, Larsson's eyes flicked back to Eric. "You're not from around here, are you?" Eric hesitated for just a second before responding. "Moved here a few months ago. The address is on the license." But Larsson wasn't really listening. His questions were starting to take on a different edge, one that suggested his concerns had little to do with a traffic stop. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" Eric kept his tone steady. "Just going home." The officer studied him, but there was something in the air now, something unspoken. Larsson wasn't just seeing a driver anymore. He was seeing something else, something that made him suspicious. Eric felt the tension, but he didn't flinch. What Larsson didn't know, that calm exterior, it wasn't naivete. It was control. Larsson took a deliberate step back, folding Eric's documents slowly before tucking them into his chest pocket. His expression shifted, his smirk faint but unmistakable, like he had already made up his mind about the man in front of him. "Step out of the car for me." Eric's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, but his face remained unreadable. "Is there a reason for that, officer?" His voice was measured, even. Larsson's lips twitched, but he masked it quickly. "I asked you to step out of the car. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The unspoken threat lingered. Eric exhaled slowly, then reached for the door handle. As he stepped out, Larsson's gaze flicked over him, sizing him up. Eric stood a little taller than the officer, broad shoulders, a tailored suit, polished shoes. Everything about him spoke of professionalism and precision. But none of that seemed to matter. "Hands where I can see them," Larsson instructed. Eric complied, his movements deliberate. "Is there something specific you're looking for, officer?" Larsson smirked faintly. "Just routine. We've had some incidents around here. Can't be too careful." Eric turned his head slightly, locking eyes with him. "Incidents involving men in business suits driving sedans? Or is this about something else?" The question landed like a punch. Larsson's composure faltered, just for a second. His hand drifted toward his belt, a reflex more than anything. "Watch your tone," he warned, voice hardening. Eric didn't waver. "I'm simply asking question." His voice was steady, not defiant, just firm in a way that unsettled the officer. Larsson leaned in. You seem awfully familiar with how this works. Got something to hide? A beat of silence. Then, "No, officer," Eric replied evenly. "I just believe in being clear about the reasons for an interaction like this. Transparency, you know?" Larsson scoffed but didn't respond immediately. He took a step back, pacing in a small circle in front of the car, trying to regain his footing in a situation that wasn't unfolding as he expected. "You seem pretty confident," he muttered, almost to himself. "Like you think you know what's going to happen next." Eric tilted his head slightly. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is." Larsson froze for half a second. His smirk disappeared, replaced with something sharper, almost defensive. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Eric's composure had knocked him off balance, and he didn't like it. The tension was electric, crackling in the space between them. But instead of stepping back, Larsson doubled down. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood." His voice was clipped. Eric raised an eyebrow. "Weapons," he repeated, his tone incredulous, but still controlled. "Do I look like someone who's carrying a weapon?" Larsson's jaw tightened, and his composure cracked. "I'm not going to ask you again." A flicker of something unreadable crossed Eric's face, but he complied. The search was rough, deliberate. It wasn't just about checking for weapons, it was about control, about asserting dominance. But Eric didn't react. Didn't stiffen. Didn't flinch. "You're clean," Larsson muttered, stepping back, frustration clear in his voice. Eric turned, meeting his gaze. "Of course I am." Larsson opened his mouth, searching for a retort. That's when Eric reached into his pocket, slow, deliberate. "I'm reaching for my badge," he said, watching Larsson's hand twitch toward his holster. "No need for theatrics. I want you to see it." The weight in his words was unmistakable. Larsson's eyes followed as Eric pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming badge. "Eric Porter," he said, voice calm but edged with meaning. "Head of Internal Affairs. Sacramento Division." Larsson went still. His eyes darted from the badge to Eric's face, searching for a sign that this was some kind of joke. But there was no humor in Eric's expression. Just quiet authority. And a hint of disappointment. And in that moment, Larsson realized his worst assumption had led him straight into a career-defining mistake.